In today's awesome painting tutorial, I'm going to teach brand new painters and beginners like you out there how to paint this easy to do gray winter scene done with oil paint. This is an influence of two different Bob Ross paintings, Gray Winter and Winter Mist, and I kind of just combined them into one easy to do painting, perfect for beginners. As always, colors, brushes, and tools are listed below, and we're going to start off on a canvas that's already coated with a thin layer of liquid white. Here we go. Using a 1-inch brush with Payne's Gray, we can start to swirl in some color. Since we're painting on top of a canvas that already has liquid white applied to it, we will get a beautiful dissipation of gray. Try to make your swirls in the shape of where you want your clouds or at least your atmosphere to flow. And if that's too much for you, just be free and loose and have a little bit of fun here, but make sure you don't paint the entire thing gray. Make sure to leave some white gaps because that will add to an awesome sky effect in just a moment. Now with a 2-inch brush, we can do the exact same circular motions we were just doing with our 1-inch brush on top of our atmosphere gray that we have here. If you want to show more gray color, have lighter circular strokes. And if you want to dissipate the color out, perhaps near the horizon line, which I recommend you do, you want to push harder and use bigger circular strokes. Doing this will allow you to achieve an easy gradient with a dark top sky, dissipating down into a light gray horizon. I think I'm going to darken up my corners a little bit with a little more Payne's Gray on a 1-inch brush, and then just fluff it in and clean it up with a 2-inch brush. When I have all my color established, then I can work out my messy paint strokes with a clean and dryish 2-inch brush. Now you could just leave your sky here and it'll look perfectly fine, but I feel like adding just some fun colors and playing around with it, and I recommend you do too. I'm going to take a fan brush loaded up here with titanium white and just a drop of red paint. Any red will do, but mine is bright red to create a beautiful little pink. In my mind, sunlight is coming through that little pocket there and just catching a little bit of these darker clouds. Make sure you swirl your brush around and only concentrate on the outside edge. If you want to add a little bit of highlight, take your fan brush, load it up with pure titanium white, and put some white highlights where you think the sunlight that is punching through that center there would be kissing your clouds. Since our first step was adding a bunch of movement with our 1-inch brush loaded up with that Payne's Gray, make sure to keep your fan brush constantly moving to keep the effect of those clouds that have that movement within them as if a storm is approaching. Now simply clean up the bottom of your cloud with a clean and dry 1-inch brush and use some small circular strokes and only touch the bottom of your cloud. The softer you touch it, the more that pink color will stay. The more you push, the more it'll dissipate into that gray color. The only rule, like I always give, is to make sure you do not touch the top of the cloud. Now take a clean and dry 2-inch brush and we can pull the top of the cloud into the body by laying the paintbrush almost flat. Go across the entire cloud at a 45-degree angle and pull the paint down into the body. Once you get from one side to the next, flip the paintbrush over and repeat the same step as you come back. After that, clean up your paintbrush on a blue shop towel, clean up any messy strokes that are below your cloud, give it a nice little fluff to make sure wind is kissing through it, and then even out all of your brush strokes by going back and forth from left to right or right to left, whatever easiest for you. Now just repeat these steps one more time to put another cloud in front of that. Use a fan brush loaded up with that same pink color. Concentrate only on the outside edge. Hypnotize the middle, pull the body in, give it some nice fluff, and even out the paint strokes, and you've got a beautiful cloud effect that came out of nowhere. Honestly, sometimes I get a little carried away with clouds, and I'm going to drop in a few more dark and stormy clouds. I feel like that light hasn't made it this far, so I'm going to take a little more Payne's Gray and start dropping in some jaggedy clouds here with my fan brush. I use the exact same steps that I've been showing you. I mean, why mix it up now when it's been working so well? Gonna use the corner of my brush and just do an outline of the cloud. Do some small circular strokes only at the bottom of my cloud to get it to blend in. Then I'm gonna pull the body in, give it a nice lift, and then even out my brush strokes. Wherever I think a cloud needs to be, I'll toss one in. And this is where you get to experiment and kind of have a little bit of fun. Think about where you want to drop your clouds in. You can make them all that light pink color, or you can make them all a dark and stormy color, or you can just have fun like me and practice and go back and forth between light, dark, and light, or whatever combination you want. All I want you to do is have a little bit of fun, be free and loose, and practice those clouds, because if you build multiple layers, it's gonna add such depth to your painting and it's really gonna pay off in the end. All right, time to move on to mountains, and we're going to use an angled shader with a combination of Payne's gray and a little bit of phthalo blue to give us a beautiful slate gray color. Now, normally I teach you not to do triangles, but since we're simplifying this tutorial here, we're gonna do 3 triangles. One large triangle over on the left-hand side, drop in your outline. Then we're gonna put one near the middle that's below the big triangle. And then we're gonna add one that fades off to the right that is a smaller triangle. Try your best not to make the right and middle triangle the same height. Try your best to stagger them. If you notice that they're the same height, don't be afraid to go back and add more to your outline. Now take your palette knife and scrape off all the remaining paint that's on the inside of that outline we just did. This will remove all the excess paint from our clouds, liquid white, and expose the toothing of our canvas, making our following steps much easier. If you're really struggling to create awesome, beautiful mountains and paint breaks, I highly suggest that you take a blue shop towel and wipe away the inside of our outline. This will really expose the toothing, making paint breaks and mountain shapes way easier for you. Now take your angled shader, load it up with that color we were just using, by the way, just to remind you, was Payne's gray with a little bit of phthalo blue in it, and fill in your mountain and start creating the shape. This is where you can transform your triangle outlines into actual mountain structures. Think about how a mountain's not a perfectly straight line. Add a few wiggles, bumps, and don't be afraid to even add in jagged edges, which is really easy to do with that angled shader due to that angular cut. It'll give your mountain a more rocky, more realistic feel to it. And this is the easy way to create a mountain structure. Now just repeat this step across all 3 of your triangle shapes to get the realistic mountain that you want. The only thing that I recommend you really pay attention to is when you're using that angled shader and filling in the body, that you keep that clean, crisp outer edge, which again is really easy to do with an angled shader. Basically, what I'm trying to say is get yourself an angled shader if you don't have one already. In fact, let me just do you one better. Go down below in the video description and click on the angled shader link and just buy one today. Trust me, you'll be thanking me later in this video. Wild cutting in here really quick. If you're interested and you want to start selling your art, but you're not exactly sure where to begin or how to do anything like that, good news is my new ultimate guidebook is now out. You can get yourself a physical copy on Amazon or download a digital copy on my PayHip site. Links all down below. This book goes over how to value your art, how to price your art, how to sell person to person, online, and everything in between. And the best part is it shows you how to close the deal and start making more money than you've ever thought before on your art. You can finally turn your passion into a profit. So use the links down below and help support me. But now, back to the video. Let's go ahead and fill in the natural body and flow of our mountain structure. Take a clean and dry 1-inch brush and bend the bristles near the top of your peak and then wiggle it towards the edge. Then you want to slowly pull down in the direction and the angle of your mountain structure. Doing this technique will make sure that you have a beautiful crisp outer edge and also pull the paint down in a natural shape and flow of your mountain. Now just repeat this on all 3 of your mountain structures and feel free to take your time here. And you can do this multiple times, create different highlight and shadow templates for your eye later on. When you're ready, move on to a clean and dry 2-inch brush and basically do the same steps, except you don't have to wiggle and get near the edge. You just want to clean up and remove all the excess paint, which is going to be key for doing paint breaks in just a moment. One awesome tip that I just love to show new painters, if you struggle putting highlights and shadows in because you can't visualize where they're going to be, I recommend using your palette knife tip and carve in a template line that starts at the peak and works its way down to the base of the mountain. The key here is to make sure you just don't make a straight line. Add a few different serpentine lines, if you will, and think about how the light and shadow would cascade across your mountain. This might be a little difficult to see on camera or through YouTube, so let me just zoom in here so you can see a close-up of what I did. All right, time for everybody's favorite part to do, but also the most headache-inducing, and that is creating paint breaks for your highlights and shadows on your mountain. Now, since we did a lot of cool prep steps to expose the toothing of the canvas, you know what? Your paint's gonna have an easier time grabbing the canvas and creating beautiful paint breaks, which is awesome if you've been struggling with this. But if you're a brand new painter or you still struggle creating paint breaks, and trust me, you know who you are, then listen up. I highly recommend that you get a tube of Winsor & Newton titanium white paint. This paint is the firmest white paint that I've been able to find, and it works beautifully and is extremely forgiving if you struggle with paint breaks. Simply roll up a nice 1 to 2 spaghetti noodles thick roll on the end of your blade and start following those template lines that we laid in. If you're having a hard time, I recommend starting out with shorter strokes with your blade more closed. Then as you get more comfortable and you get a feel for the blade, the roll, and your canvas, you can start to open up that blade and your forearm and wrist to expose more of that paint to create these beautiful, longer paint break strokes. If you truly struggle painting mountains and doing paint breaks with the highlights and shadows, I have 3 awesome videos that I recommend that you check out. One is an in-depth mountain tutorial that goes over how to make distant mountains and close mountains and breaks it down into easy to do steps that goes in more in depth of what we just went over. Then I have 2 paint along videos that are just fantastic. One is a black and white mountain and one is a frozen majestic mountain. Both of those are fun to paint and will challenge your mountain paint skills, but also build them up. And of course, I've always got your back. I'll put links to those videos down in the video description, and I'll link them at the end of this video here on the end cards. Now, every highlight needs a shadow, and my shadow color is gonna be a mixture of Payne's gray, black, a little bit of phthalo blue, and a touch of titanium white. When you mix this marbly and cut it through your knife and apply it to the shadow side of your mountain, you're gonna get all these multitude of different colors. And it's gonna be easy to see how the darker colors create these dark little valleys and how the blue and white create these just little tiny highlights and ripples within your mountain, creating all these different beautiful effects. Now, it's important to remember when you're dropping in your shadow color that you need to follow the angles of your mountain. You also want to make it look like your mountain is just protruding out of the canvas. To achieve this, add a little bit of a drop and swoop motion to your mountain rather than a straight line. This will give off the appearance that your mountain has all this different crags and structures and jags and deep cuts in it. And it's just a simple way to give your mountain a little more character. This point here is a great time to correct any mistakes or add any extra little details that you want. For me, I think the light coming through the valleys of my mountains, some snow would be highlighted there because the light would be catching it. So I'm just gonna add some specular highlights and play around with my snow as it cascades down through the valleys. You can also clean up your edges, fade anything down and out, or even dissipate it away or just remove it completely. This is your mountain landscape. Think about all the elements that are playing around with it and within it, so that way you get a better idea. If you're stuck and you're not sure what to do or what to add, I recommend take a small 5-minute break, step away from your painting and look at it from a little bit of a distance, and you will see where you need to add some details. That's like literally one of the best tips I can give any painter out there. All right, let's clean up the base of our mountain with a clean and dry 2-inch brush and tap the base and follow the same angles to create a nice misty layer and work out the excess paint with that 2-inch brush. Then go over to a clean and dry 1-inch brush and you can start to pull down the remaining paint in the same direction as the angles of your mountain. This will create a nice motion blur and remove all of the detail near the bottom of your mountain, which is what would happen naturally with the environment that you would be looking at the mountain. All the atmosphere and light would create a strong diffusion, so there shouldn't be a lot of detail at the base anyways. Wild cutting in here really quick to say if you're enjoying this beautiful and simple to do easy gray winter scene and you want to take your paintings to the next level, but you're not exactly sure where to start or what supplies to get, or more importantly, what supplies to avoid, then I recommend you check out my oil painting starter packet kit, which you can download today in the links down below. It goes over all that stuff and more to get you started off on the right foot with your wet on wet or landscape adventures. Plus, it helps support me so I can continue to make awesome videos like this. Now, back to the video. With a fan brush loaded up with a combination of Payne's gray and titanium white to make a very light gray, we can start to drop in some background trees that shouldn't have too much detail. In fact, you can actually just pretty much block these in, which is just the basic shapes. Put in any cluster of tree amount that you want. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever you want to do. If you stink at trees, I would recommend this is a great place to practice them because they shouldn't have a lot of detail to begin with. When you've got all your clusters of trees in, we're going to make them sit on a snow bank that's kind of cascading down to the right. Take your palette knife and scrape in the general direction that you want your snowbank to go. And yes, it's okay if it grabs the base of the trees and that gray paint. We actually want that because it's going to knock down the value of our white in just a moment. Take a blue shop towel and remove the excess paint because we only need a little bit of that gray paint to knock down the value of our white. But make sure you rub in the same direction you will be taking your snow slope. Now take a 1-inch brush, load it up with titanium white paint, and start painting on top of that light gray and build your slope structure. Make sure to make your paint fade from the top of the trees and the top of your hill down towards the bottom because that's how light would cascade off of this slope here. Take some time and think about how you want to build your structure. Now take your angled shader, load it up with titanium white, and you can start to add in distant and diffused background highlights that are laying on top of that slope you had just built. Think about where the light would hit. If I could give you a little bit of advice, think about how the light would come down from the sky and hit certain parts of your slope. But in addition to that, think about how light would come through certain sections of the trees and catch that slope there. Take some time here and think about how you really want to build your slope. Now, since we added in some highlights, obviously, near the base of this slope, not as much light is going to touch it. So let's add in some shadow. And for that, I kind of want like an icy color. So I'm going to use a little bit of phthalo blue and just put in some real general cut shapes of color here that I'm eventually going to blend in with a 1-inch brush and fade them out because I just want a little bit of contrast here, which is going to help when I build layers later on. I just adore texture within landscapes when I use oil paint. Makes it stand out. So I'm gonna put some titanium white on the end of the small blade of my palette knife and just start adding in some texture where I think the light has cascaded through the tree line. When I get to the ridge where there is no trees, I'm gonna switch over to the fatter side of my blade and add some more snow that I think is sitting on top of that ridge. I will also pull some of that snow down my slope to create some beautiful texture. This will also help create the illusion of depth as I can start to see as that slope gets closer to me, I can see more texture, but as it fades into the background near that tree line, there is less texture adding to depth. Time to add in a couple of big trees. I'm going to use a combination of sap green and Payne's gray. I want to knock down that green because this environment is very cold and I feel like my tree should get off that impression as well. I like to throw in a trunk template line for me, and then when I use the corner of my fan brush loaded up with that same color, I like to zigzag back and forth to create a basic template. I'm gonna be honest with you, I make good trees, but I have to start with a basic template because I just can't get them the shape that I want on my first or even second pass, and I know a lot of you can't either. So don't be afraid to drop in a basic template line with some just basic blocking of color. Once you have this, it becomes way easier to build your tree shape. You can continue that zigzag back and forth motion as you work your way down the tree as you go from skinnier tops to fatter bottoms, or you can work on one side individually, or you can even tap in and out from left to right to create these beautiful falling down branches. It's completely up to you on how you want to work on your tree. If you are really struggling with trees, just take some time and go slow here. Think about how you want to bend the bristles of that brush to make all these thousands of needles come out of it. That is when you can truly make some magic happen with this paintbrush. At the base of our tree, just like we did with our background trees, take your palette knife and scrape away the excess paint in the direction you want to have a snow slope. Then take a blue shop towel, Wipe away the excess color, again in the direction of your snow slope. In here, we can start adding in the details. I'm going to drop in my shadow side first with my angled shader, then lay some titanium white on top of that and start building the structure of my snow slope and how I want it to flow from top right of where the base of my tree is down to the lower left. Then from here, I'm going to take my palette knife, load it up with a little bit of titanium white, and start adding some white snow texture on where I think snow collected most. I'm definitely going to put some snow on the ridge line that separates my background snow slope from my foreground snow slope. This will help create multiple planes of layers, adding to depth. Lastly, take a clean and dry 1-inch brush and start to feather out just some slight details, because we are going to put one more snowbank in front of this. We want to make sure it only has a little bit of detail. Feather from the bottom of the snow up towards the tree as you pull your paintbrush away to have the best results. Let's move over to the left side of our canvas and really balance out our landscape by adding a pair of trees. I showed you all the steps, and guess what? The easy part is it's the same steps as before. When you're ready to move on to the base, take your palette knife, scrape away the excess paint in the direction that you want to build your snowbank, then take your blue shop towel, wipe away the excess paint that was left behind, again, going in the same angles you want to build your snowbank. Then you can take your angled shader, throw in your shadow colors, and also throw in your highlight colors that you really want to structure your snowbank and how it shapes and flows. The only other additional note I want to give you here is, since we're now working in the foreground, there's going to be more detail, hence colors would be a little richer. So make sure you use a little more phthalo blue to make it more richer and darker, because that'll help with the illusion of depth. And speaking of depth, you want to make sure you pull your snowbank just slightly in front of that misted point of the second snowbank on the right. This will create planes and layers of depth within your painting. With our highlight and shadow colors in place, we can slowly blend them together with a 1-inch brush. This will help create beautiful transitions between bright spots and dark spots that are laying within the snow and under the snow. Take some time here and make sure that you don't wipe away all of one color. You still want to have really strong stark whites, but you also want to have some deep, dark, rich blues in here to create different depths and layers of planes on that foreground layer. Repeat the process we've been doing with our palette knife with laying in nice, thick snow texture. Again, think about where the snow would get kissed by the sunlight as it peeks through certain parts of the trees or cascades across your hills. Spend some time here and think about how you really want your snow to fall down your snow slope. Each stroke that you do will help define the shape and flow of your snow slope. For certain parts that you want to have slightly less details in them, perhaps the bottom of your snow bank and slope, take a clean and dryish 1-inch brush and lightly feather on top of certain parts that you want to dissipate out the details. Just keep in mind, since there's so much extra paint and texture here, you need to have an extremely light touch. Let's go back to our trees and add some beautiful highlights and shadows. And to do this, I'm going to use a blue shop towel and just tear off a piece that matches the shape and size of my tree, generally by tearing the paper towel in half. I'm gingerly going to lay this on my tree, and I do mean gingerly. I'm going to place it on there, and then with the back of my finger, start to lightly press against the tree. Be careful here, we're not applying a lot of pressure, I'm just feathering across with my fingers. Now what this is going to do is absorb all the excess pigment and oil binder that is sitting on top of the paint. This is what creates a barrier from our other layer of paint sticking on. So let's remove it with the shop towel. As you pull away cleanly towards you, you will see you get all the excess pigment and oil off. Now our tree is slightly drier for us to put creamier, more flexible, and more workable highlight and shadows on top of it. Before we add highlights and shadows to our tree, let's throw in some really quick trunks. Take the base of your blade and lay that down to where you're going to make a straight line that goes up and through the top of your pine tree or evergreen tree. You only need to take this line a little bit above to get a nice straight point. And only concentrate on the top because we're going to be filling this in with some brown paint to create a trunk in just a moment. Take your palette knife and cut it through some Van Dyke brown to get a nice roll on the edge of your palette knife. Here, you can start laying in the trunks of your trees across all the trees that you've established in your midground and foreground. I generally like to leave a template line first where I just do some slight few touches across my tree, and then I'll come back with a little more Van Dyke brown and leave the top of my tree with a skinnier trunk like would happen in nature, and then I'll start to fatten up that trunk and pull a little more paint across to get a nice thicker trunk near the middle section and base. When it comes to making my highlight color, I'm going to be mixing it with Gamblin Stand Oil, which is not only going to make the paint more flexible and stick on top of my other paint, but when it dries, it's going to give it a beautiful, glossy, and shiny sheen, which I think will look beautiful on the trees. When it comes to adding highlights to your tree, you want to think about a few things. One, making your paint more flexible, which we already did by introducing stand oil. And two, think about where your light source will be touching your trees. Since our light source is generally in the middle, the trees on the left will have the highlights on the right, and the tree on the right will generally have the highlights on the left. The last thing you want to think about is don't overdo it. Work slow here and just add a few highlights at a time and take a small break in between and just go back and tap in where you want them. It's way easier to add more highlights, but it can be extremely difficult to take too many highlights away. So take your time, go slow, and think about where those highlights would kiss and sit on your trees. Now you don't have to do this step, but if you want to, you can add some shadow on your trees, which is just a mixture of a little bit of phthalo blue and white just to knock it down to make an icy color. And you're gonna add this on the opposite side of your tree and even under some of your highlight color just to create a beautiful transition. Something that I should have mentioned on the highlight side is, yeah, it's okay to paint over the trunk that you first put down. In fact, this is actually gonna make your tree look more three-dimensional. When it comes to shadows, don't overdo it. Remember, we want just a perfect and equal balance of that beautiful green that we laid down, the trunk, the highlights, and shadows. You want all of those to play together. Now finish this across all three of your trees and you're gonna have some beautiful three-dimensional trees with a lot of character to them. A lot of brand new painters will try to paint something way too hard, way too fast. Try to start simple with a painting like this. When you do, you're gonna practice on how to make beautiful and fluffy clouds that have two different dimensions to them, light and soft or dark and stormy. You're also gonna work on your horizon lines and how to dissipate down into beautiful gradients. And of course, you can work on your K2 mountain or any smaller mountain ridges that are gonna connect together with beautiful highlights that are easy to do with short palette knife strokes. Plus, you're gonna work on one of the easiest to do midgrounds, and then you can have fun with your foreground with big trees and different highlights on your snow banks. I mean, just play around with it and have some fun. This is a great painting to play around with different textures. It's gonna separate your painting out from a photograph with all that beautiful texture just popping right off the canvas. If you wanna see any other tutorials from me and break them down on how brand new painters can get started, you know what to do. Go down and leave me a comment and let me know what you would like me to show you how to paint. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit like and of course, smash that subscribe button. If you want to work on your mountain paintings, hey, you know what you can do? Check out the videos over to my side where I show you two awesome paintings, one done only in black and white and a frozen majestic mountain. Both are worth watching because they have my beautiful face. I'll catch you all later. Take care, happy painting, and as always, peace.